what? Yes, this is I Don't Have a Band, and today I'm talking about this 3 EQ process that I use when mixing my heavy guitars. Now, you may be wondering, why use 3 EQs when you can just take 1 EQ and do everything that you need to do? Well, when mixing my guitars, specifically EQ in this case, there's 3 specific functions that I use an EQ for. One is corrective, number 2 is creative, and number 3 is fitting it into the mix. Those are 3 very distinct functions that I just can't achieve with 1 EQ. It just gets too complicated. So I've got this process. It's sort of a hybrid of things that I've learned along the way, and I wanted to share this with you and hopefully give you enough of an overview of this concept that you'll be able to take it away and try it out in your own projects. Now, there's no real template for this technique, but there's a little bit of a template. It kind of looks something like this. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later in the video. So let's get to the first stage that I call cutting off the bark. Yeah, cutting off the bark, like a woodworker does before he starts carving or shaping a piece of wood. Do I really have to explain myself? Some of you are going to be recording your amp, with a speaker and a microphone, and what you have on your timeline now is an actual recorded, we'll call it the finished recorded tone. Now, some of you are using maybe a head recording direct as I do here, and you have to use some kind of IR to finish processing that tone, or if you're using an amp modeler or sim or whatever you're using, I want to start with the established recorded tone. So however you're getting that, that's where we want to be at this point, and then we're going to add our first EQ to the chain. So that's where I'm starting. So the first thing I like to do here is using sort of a multi-band EQ, something that gives you a lot of access to all the different frequencies. I'm actually going to use a stock EQ here, the channel EQ in Logic. Whatever DAW you're using, it doesn't matter. I just recommend some kind of multi-band EQ like this so you can really hunt for frequencies. Now, what I do is I jack one frequency up, I really narrow the Q, and then I just sweep around looking for some frequencies that just don't sound good. So once you've discovered that frequency, all you got to do is bring it down and keep that Q pretty narrow because you don't want to be taking out too much. You just want to try to isolate some frequencies that are not working. I generally don't do more than 2 cuts in this process. You don't want to go too crazy, and you don't need to focus below 90 hertz or above 10K. We're going to address those later. So really you're looking in between 90 and 10K. Just fish around for things that just aren't working and just cut them out of there. If you're struggling with some frequencies that you just can't get out, sometimes it's like that extra fizziness from an amplifier or just something that, the EQ just doesn't seem to be able to solve. What you can do in this step is actually using a de-esser. It's actually worth trying. And it's kind of funny, when I was planning this video, I got contacted by this new plugin company called Techivation, and they have this De-Esser plugin. There's actually a free version of this plugin. They actually sent me over Pro, and I literally just hadn't got my hands on it a couple of days ago, but really, if you have a de-esser in your DAW, if you're looking for a free one, I'll put a link in the description. You can check this one out. But this is pretty cool because you can isolate specific frequencies. And this particular plugin almost acts like a compressor in a sense, where you can set an attack and a threshold. So you can determine how aggressively it goes after a specific frequency and how much it brings it down. Sometimes a de-esser can do a job in combination with an EQ in the early stages when you're trying to get some nasty frequencies out of there. And definitely worth a try. So I'll put a link in the description, but definitely consider a de-esser if you've got some stubborn frequencies that you don't seem to be able to get out. So now that we're going to move on to the second EQ, and typically what I use here is a channel strip. You don't have to use a channel strip here. I like using a channel strip from a Plugin Alliance, the Neve channel strip. I really like it. Now there's a lot of other things in this plugin. You've got a gate, you've got a dynamic section, but we're going to focus on the EQ. Now here we're doing creative EQing, so we don't need the precision of a multi-band EQ like we had in the previous one. You certainly can use the same one if you want, but I think adding a little variety to the plugin chain goes a long way to shaping some really nice tones. The reason I like a channel strip in this case is because this particular plugin, and many like it, introduce some interesting harmonic content to the sound, a little extra saturation, and it just a roundness that I don't get with just a standard multiband EQ. That's what they're designed to do. And also it's not as visual as that multiband EQ, so you're really forced to use your ears, and you want to craft the tone. And we're going to do this in solo, by the way. This is an important thing to understand at this stage, is because we're still crafting the original tone. I know guitar players can be pretty bitchy about their sound. If you're working with other guitar players, you want them to be comfortable that you're not changing their sound. Ultimately, you're going to have to fit it into the mix. But at this stage, I'm still crafting the tone. So I work in solo. I'm really just working on getting that sound out of the guitar that I'm looking for. Now, if you're in a home studio like me and you have certain limitations in terms of recording, let's say real amplifiers, I'll sit in front of my amp for hours tweaking, getting it just right. But in this recording environment, because I can't isolate the cabs, what I'm recording is not going to be what's happening here in the room. It's going to sound differently. So I take this opportunity at this point to EQ that guitar to get it sounding the way I want to, knowing that we're going to squeeze it and fit it into the mix, and that's going to be in stage 3. So if you're using a channel strip much like this, or a vintage style EQ, something like that, you can do much like I did in the first example, where we would spike a certain frequency and sweep around to find, but now we're looking for favorable moments, right? So but by cranking it up and finding some really interesting moments, once you find something that sounds right to you, you can bring it down. Now, I'm going to get more specific about what frequencies you should be looking for, because that little template I'm going to share with you a little bit later. We'll discuss that momentarily, but we're crafting the tone. So we want to start focusing on the areas of the guitar that sound really good. We've already cut out some of those frequencies that we don't want, and we're going to deal with fitting it into the mix in the third step, and that's going to involve some cuts as well. Well, I thought that was pretty cool. Perhaps you agree with me. If you do, simply clicking the like button goes a long way to supporting this channel and encourages me to make more content just like this. Of course, you can leave a comment, you could share this video, and ultimately, if you like what I'm doing here, you can click that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. If you want to do a deeper dive with The Lonely Rocker, I am on Patreon. I'll link that down below. All right, let's get back to the video. All right, now it's time to introduce the third EQ, and this is where we're going to take our finished tone and we're going to fit it into the mix. And I actually do have that template for you, so let me just get it. So if you take a look at this chart here, this outlines all of the key areas that you want to focus on when EQing your guitars. Now remember, this is just a guide. It doesn't mean everything you're going to find is going to be exactly within these ranges, but this is generally where you want to look. Now we're going to roll off the top and the bottom end. Everything below 90 Hertz, I just use a high pass filter and I get it out of the way. You've got your bass guitar down there, you got your kick drum. Those guitars are just going to get in the way and it's just mud and you don't need it. So everything below 90 Hertz, just get rid of it, just high pass it out of there. And then everything above 10K, there's not a lot of useful information on the guitar up there. And again, it's just going to get in the way of other instruments. So you can use a low pass filter and just get it out of the way. So now let's look at the other key areas of the guitar and areas that you want to search for in terms of cutting and boosting. Now, if you start searching between 150 and 200, you're going to find the thickness of the guitar somewhere in and around there. So much like we did at the beginning when we started boosting frequencies and sweeping around, you can do the same thing here. We are working in context though. So the key here is we want the guitar to fit into our mix now. So if we want to bring some thickness of the guitar and we don't want to be in the way of other instruments like the bass and things like that down low, you want to look to do some boosting between 150 and 200. Now the life of the guitar sits between about 300 and 1000. So again, we are contending with other instruments. You are working in the mix now, but you can fish around here. These are areas if you want to bring back some of that real life of the guitar and you don't want to step on other instruments, you can move around in between that range and find where the guitar will really sit nicely. And by the way, a video that I did a little while ago when I talked about mixing with spectrum analyzers, I'll put a link down below. That actually can help you in this case where you're looking to find some space to boost a guitar in this case. And using a spectrum analyzer to see where your whole project is sitting actually can help you. So definitely check that out after you've gone through this video. Now, generally between 1K and 2K is where you'll find that real honk of the guitar, just that parts of that guitar that just don't sound good. This is an area that you can just knock out of the guitar. You're not going to lose any good tone here. Now, I would fish around. I wouldn't do it blindly, but again, using the same technique that we used in the other parts of our EQ process here is fish around here and look to cut somewhere between 1 and 2K. And the real shine of the guitar, there's a big range here between 3K and 8K. You've got a lot of room to work here. This is why you can find the spot for the guitar, find where it really needs that articulation and just to sit nicely in the mix. And that, that definition that you're looking to get out of your guitars, you're going to find that between 3 and 8K. By the way, this chart here, I'm actually going to make available on my Patreon page. So if you are one of my patrons, you can actually download this chart, and it actually comes with some additional instructions. So if you want to get a copy of this, I'm going to put a link to my Patreon account in the description. So if you want to grab that, come check us out. Well, there's my 3 EQ process. I hope that's opened your mind to using multiple EQs to shape your guitar tone. And in the first stage, we're just looking to get rid of frequencies that we just don't need, get them out of there. In the second stage, we're more creative and just getting that guitar sounding right to our ears. And in the third stage, we're going to use an EQ to fit it all in the mix. You can reference that template that I provided here in the video to carve out space for the guitar, let it sit nicely with other instruments. And that's the key function of step number 3. So don't be afraid to have multiple EQs on your timeline. It's a very effective way to really carve space for your guitar and make them sound really good and play nice with other instruments. Well, if you've made it this far, I'd love to know who you are. Perhaps you can identify yourself in the comments, but I'd really love to know what you think about this technique. Is it something you're going to try? Have you given it a go? Perhaps you have something to add to the discussion. That's what the comment section is for. Now, if you've enjoyed this video, I'd hope you'd consider interacting with this video in some way. It goes a long way to supporting this channel, and I really appreciate it. But ultimately, I'd love to see you again in another video. So I'm going to give you a couple of options right now. If you enjoyed this video, please consider hitting the like button and/or leaving a comment. And if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Remember, you don't need a band to rock and roll. There are a lot of great musical projects you can do by yourself right from your own home. I hope to see you again in another video.